Today's talk is the inaugural sermon of a series called Our UU Values. Today's focus is on love at the center. Dolores Miera will read an essay by Reverend Bill Sinkford titled Love, a Work in Progress. Dolores?
Good morning. So this is going to be kind of a start of a series so that we can figure out what our values are, right? You know, our newly adopted values. And as you know, Article 2 from our bylaws, the UUA bylaws, I want to read them to you, and not the whole thing, but just this first half here, so we understand why. And later in the essay that I read from Bill Sinkford, he'll explain why we're changing them, why we change them. This is the change. Unitarian Universal Association will devote its resources and use its organizational powers for religious, educational, and humanitarian purposes. Its primary purposes are to assist congregations in their vital ministries, to support and train leaders, both lay and professional, to foster lifelong faith formation and spiritual development, to heal historic injustices, to support and encourage the creation of new Unitarian Universalist communities, and to advance our Unitarian Universalist values in the world. Unitarian Universalist Association will actively engage its members in the transformation of the world through liberating love. Then the values and covenant. Next page. Thank you. The values and covenant. As Unitarian Universalists, we covenant congregation to congregation and through our association to support and assist one another in our ministries. We draw from our heritages of freedom, reason, hope, and courage, building on the foundation of love. Love is the power that holds us together and is at the center of our shared values. We are accountable to one another for doing the work of living our shared values through the spiritual discipline of love. So we're not gonna go through all that today. We don't want everyone falling asleep, okay? So, but I just wanna highlight, and what we're gonna do in the next 6 months, okay, one a month. We'll go into each one of the values, okay? So just to go down there, and they'll look different coming up. Shared value, Unitarian Universalist values inseparable from one another are independence. They're not in the jet pig order, just so you know. Okay, interdependence, pluralism, justice, transformation, generosity, and equity. So what I want to do today is just talk about love at the center. And I went through and I read this book. Have any of you read this book yet? Love at the Center just came out, okay. And so I went, and they're essays. There are 12 essays from religious professionals and lay leaders. And I went through and I'd get to one and I go, oh, this is good. This is what I need to share with everybody, right? Oh, then I get to the next one. Oh, that one's really better. Okay, and then I came across Bill Sinkford's, and I said, oh, gotta share that one. And I had a big bio on him, but for the sake of time, here's a shorter bio on Bill Sinkford. And if you've never heard him speak, get online and listen to him speak. He's really good. The Reverend Bill Sinkford, him, served as the 7th president of the Unitarian Universalist Association and the first Black president of the traditionally white denomination from 2001 to 2009. He also served as one of the 3 interim UUA co-presidents in 2017. He is Minister Emeritus of the First Unitarian Church of Portland, Oregon, and recently completed service as traditional minister at All Souls Church Unitarian in Washington, D.C. So this is his essay about love at the center in the book, and it's called Love, a Work in Process by Bill Sinkford. So sit back, listen, enjoy. The year was 1959. The American Unitarian Association and the Universalist Church of America were meeting together in Syracuse, New York. They were there to vote on joining two iconic American faith communities. The idea of merger had been on the table since 1865, almost 100 years. There had been decades of study commissions and thousands of surveys to test grassroots support for and resistance to coming together. For the merger to become real, both communities had to approve a set of proposed bylaws for the new Unitarian Universalist Association. 57 amendments were put forward, voted upon, and passed. Only one outstanding challenge remained. It came down to one word in Article 2, in language that would commit the new merged faith to cherish and spread the universal truths taught by the great prophets and teachers of humanity in every age and tradition, immemorially summarized by our Judeo-Christian heritage as love to God and love to man. Our Judeo-Christian heritage? Jesus had been mentioned in an earlier version, but the growing humanist sentiment among the Unitarians had ruled that out. The question was how tightly tethered the new merged faith would declare itself to be to Christianity. That one word, our, focused an essential question of identity. In the middle of the night, an agreement was finally reached to change our to the Judeo-Christian heritage. Sleepless in Syracuse was the way one article described the drama of that night. Ted, can you shut the heater off? I see people dozing off. Sorry. Oh, right, that right here. No, that's right. I'll get it. So this is here. Another teaching moment. Right. Oh, I got it on 80. Thank you. So some of you may have reacted less to the Christian language and more to the male gendered language of that story. Love to God and love to man. In fact, a grassroots movement of UU women and their allies objecting to gendered language fuels the first major revision of Article 2, 25 years after the Syracuse Convention in 1985. How many of you, longtime UUs, remember this? Okay. The question of relationships to the Christian tradition was still alive, but the 1985 revision dealt with that by separating the sources on which we rely from the 7 new non-gendered principles. The new Article 2 was almost unanimously approved, but over time, the statement of identity expressed in those 7 principles satisfied more and more Unitarian Universalists less and less. They articulated an ethical identity, not a religious identity. They included not one word of traditional religious language. I raised questions about this when I was president of the UUA, sparking what came to be called the language of reverence controversy. The principles were not only abstract, but passive statements with no verbs, no action words at all, in a faith that prided itself on activism. But it was not until another grassroots movement with the leadership from members of All Souls in Washington, D.C., called us to name the central challenge of racism and reflect on our accountability. That energy gendered for a new approach to describe our religious identity. It was not until hundreds of congregations considered and adopted the eighth principle that our larger family of faith decided that we again needed new language to define who we are as religious people. I offer this short history lesson to make a point that these formal statements of religious identity in our bylaws tend to follow movement within our faith rather than lead it. They have tended to reflect consensus rather than aspiration. Even the important but less encompassing change reflected in the addition of earth-centered spirituality to our sources in 1995 followed the rapidly expanding number of Unitarian Universalists who found meaning in those traditions. How does change take place in Unitarian Universalism in this faith community in which the question of religious authority is always on the agenda? We value individualism so very highly, it is no accident that the inherent worth and dignity of each individual is our first principle, interdependence our last. Change almost never comes top-down in Unitarian Universalism. Almost all UU congregations light a chalice in worship. No one, no group, no congregations were told to do that. No General Assembly voted to require a chalice lighting in UU worship. Spirit of Life is sung in so many congregations. There was no vote at the General Assembly adopting that hymn as our common doxology. Who knew, right? Consensus developed that lighting a chalice could be an important shared ritual. Consensus gathered that Spirit of Life could be a defining element in our worship lives. You may not consider this discussion of change to be theological, but how we do church and how we change church are central theological questions. I would argue that our practice of this faith is every bit as important as our belief and our language. Several open and active questions, they are called arguments in the world of theological discourse, are addressed in the current, and he wrote this before the vote occurred, in the current recommended change: racism and accountability, the limits of individualism and reaction to hierarchy, and yearning for more specifically religious language among them. One question this new approach raises is therefore, what consensus has developed or is developing on these religious questions? Have we, for example, moved beyond racial representation as the goal and toward dismantling the broader culture of white supremacy? Are we ready to consider the place of ordination and the religious culture where shared and lay leadership is the increasing priority? Our history does not ask what stone tablets we should chisel, what transcendent and unchanging truths we should embrace, but what questions we should be asking. These questions locate our reflection and a theological world of process. You've probably heard the self-deprecating commentary common among us. Process is our most important product. Have you been to a board meeting? No, okay. Perhaps that, however, is not a weakness, just a difference from other ways to be religious. Perhaps it is, in fact, one of our great strengths if we would embrace it. Revelation is not sealed. It's a fundamental part of the way we live as religious people. Despite our yearning for certainty and our attachment to the familiar. With all of these questions alive among us, a new approach to describing our religious identity was needed, just as the principles were a new approach back in the 1980s. A proposal was developed by a committee presented at the Pittsburgh General Assembly and approved for a year of study. The 2024 GA adopted the new language by more than the required 2/3 margin. Our fundamental language is driven democratically from the grassroots up. But these statements reflect movement of this spirit that is already taking place among us in our covenanted communities and in our complicated spiritual lives. They are a reflection of where the Spirit has led us so far. They are not dictated by any authority other than our own lives. They are useful and have authority only to the extent that they reflect who we understand ourselves to be. The new proposal has many things to recommend it. In my view, he says, it is clearly a statement of religious, not ethical identity. It speaks to values, not abstract principles. The values listed are interdependent, not listed with individualism at the top. The new language includes plenty of verbs calling for reflection and for action. Our anti-oppression and anti-racism commitments are infused throughout the language of this proposal. Again, before it was voted on, which it passed. Systems of power, privilege, and oppression have traditionally created barriers for persons and groups with particular identities, ages, abilities, and histories. We pledged to replace such barriers with ever-widening circles of solidarity and mutual respect. Rather than a list of sources, the proposal offers a statement of inspiration. As Unitarian Universalists, we use and are inspired by sacred and secular understandings that help us to live into our values. We respect the histories, contexts, and cultures in which they were created and are currently practiced. We are grateful for the religious ancestries we inherit and the diversity which enriches our faith. Most importantly, love is at the center. Love is the power that holds us together and is at the center of our shared values. We are accountable to one another for doing the work of living our shared values through the spiritual discipline of love. What might it mean to put love at the center? Has it become a consensus among us? The first thing to note is that in many ways, love is already at the center of our Unitarian Universalist community, culture, and language. How many of you have one of those yellow shirts with "Side with Love" in big letters across the front? Yeah, a couple. Yeah, okay, good. Okay. When we arrive at protests, people often say, "Here come the love people." Yay. Centering love associates Unitarian Universalism with its greatest recent achievements, gay and lesbian empowerment, and most effective witness for justice in the struggle for marriage equality. And beloved community is more important for us. It is in the mission statement of many UU congregations. Beloved community associates this faith with Dr. King, with civil rights victories of the last century. It's not hard to argue that putting love at the center recognizes movement and change that is already in process. It is possible to view love at the center as reflecting a consensus that has already substantially developed among us. I want to test that proposition, however, in several ways. First, past victories can be important in shaping identity, but the marriage equality movement did not address transphobia or provide much wisdom in the shifting expression of gender and gender identity. It did not offer a collective critique of the gender binary or even critique of the institution of marriage. The ending of legal apartheid, is important as that was, left this country with the culture of white supremacy still in place, still in need of a Black Lives Matter movement. Can placing love at the center both affirm progress we have been a part of, but also call us to engage the challenges ahead? Can Article 2 be more than a statement of consensus already reached? Can Article 2 ask us for faithfulness as we move into uncharted theological and political territory? This is where the values that surround love in this new approach can help. Inseparable from one another, These shared values are justice, generosity, pluralism, transformation, equity, and interdependence. Perhaps if we hold an aspiration this complex, it will work against the kind of weaponizing of the principles I've seen in so many church conflicts. You've seen it too, how my inherent worth and dignity has been hurled against your commitment to democratic process and your belief in justice, equity, and compassion. Perhaps statements of religious identity this complex will lead us into deeper reflection rather than more unproductive argument. Can this one function as aspiration, calling us into deeper reflection, as well as confirmation of our past success? Can this statement of religious identity go beyond the lowest common denominator among us, calling this faith to wrestle with questions about which consensus has not developed? Most of us, with the experience of relational intimacy as our most powerful reference, know that love is not just a warm feeling. Our most powerful experience of love leaves no doubt that love requires real effort, that to love is a decision, not a condition. But this is the language of love just a cipher, a way to suggest a higher power, to suggest God, while avoiding that word which remains loaded for many of us? The Gospel of John offers the succinct opinion that God is love. One theologian I have learned from suggests that love is the least worst way to talk about God, or we could call it the least worst way to talk about the mystery that transcends our individual lives. Even that language is, I know, a challenge for some among us. What is this love that we would place at the center of our concern? And how does it work? Does this love have power? Does it desire a particular outcome? Or is this love partnering with us, or perhaps even entirely dependent on us? When placing love at the center, allow us to claim a collective vision and a knowing that there is a better way to live? Could it be that placing love at the center would simply allow us to gather confidence and possibilities that we can only glimpse? Might its value be sharpening our focus on what we hold to be of ultimate importance? Could putting love at the center be a fundamental act of faith? Could it be an act of resistance that rejects the way things are as the best they can be? Could Article 2 become less a consensus statement about the way things work and more a commitment to help things work differently? Could this new approach point us toward hope? We have been exploring how the principles can help us live faithful lives in a difficult world for almost 40 years. It's important to remember that foundational language takes time to live into. It is also important to remember that it is likely to be around for a long time. For years, many of us were able to convince ourselves that progress toward the beloved community was almost inevitable if we worked for it, until recent years. But today, we know that we're going to need a faith that can sustain us in the face of reversals. The last question for all of us is not whether we place the word love at the center of some graphic that will live on some website. The real question is whether we can experience and find joy in a love that holds us and can help us live as we want to live, even a world that is demonstrably indifferent to suffering. May the answer to that question be yes. Ashe and amen. Thank you for listening. That's lesson number 1 out of 7.